Once, you could stop. Not for long, just a moment.
Once you would finish something and sit for a second without opening something else. It felt normal, almost unnoticeable. Today, that moment is gone. You close one task and your hand is already moving to the next one. Not because you need to, because silence feels strange. You fill the day with small things, emails, messages, errands, lists, notifications popping up, apps reminding you what to do. Everything is moving, nothing gets stuck. And still, at the end of the day, the big things are in the exact same place. Nothing collapsed, you didn't fail, but you didn't really move either. So you add one more small thing, just so you don't have to stop. You open an app, check something, reply to someone. Because stopping feels like emptiness, and moving feels like control. And that's the difference between motion and progress that started to blur.
It didn't happen in one day. Most of us didn't notice the exact moment. You just started filling every gap, not leaving space. If there were 5 minutes, something went in there. Another quick check, another fast reply, another thing to mark as done. You open an app just to see if there's an update. You answer a message because it only takes a second. You mark something as done because it feels like progress. Not because of outside pressure. No one forced you. It just felt right to stay in motion, because motion gives immediate relief, even when it doesn't lead anywhere. There are things you know you need to stop for. A conversation, a decision, a direction. But before that happens, something small slips in between. Not on purpose, almost automatically. The day fills up with things that are easy to move, things that don't really require you to choose. An email you can answer quickly, a message you can mark as read, a small task you can close in a moment. Each one takes a second, but together, they fill the entire day. In this way, without a conscious decision, busyness becomes a layer that protects you, not from work, but from what comes up when there's no noise. Because when there's silence, something asks for attention. Not drama, not a crisis, just a small truth that's easier to postpone. A question that isn't answered, a direction that isn't chosen, something that was supposed to move, but didn't. And if you give that space, it requires a choice. So you keep moving, not forward, just not stopping. And the confusing part is this: from the outside, everything looks functional. On the inside, something is waiting.
Before we begin, if you value quiet, thoughtful content like this, subscribing helps this channel grow and makes it possible to keep creating videos without noise or hype. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin.
There's a reason this feels like movement, and it's not an accident. The brain doesn't measure direction, it measures change. You don't need to move forward to feel like you're moving forward. You just need something to be different from what it was a moment ago. Something happens, something shifts, signal of life, a signal that you're still in the game. It doesn't ask where you're going, only whether something happened just now. And that's where it gets confusing, because the feeling is real. You're not imagining the relief. It's there. It's just not connected to progress. It's connected to the disappearance of silence. The moment you do something, the tension eases, not because anything was solved, but because something was shifted. The question that was there a second ago is no longer here. The choice that needed to happen is pushed a little further away. The tension that started to rise settles down. And this is how, without noticing, busyness begins to feel like direction. Not because it leads anywhere, but because it prevents stopping. And this is the moment when it becomes hard to tell the difference between moving and changing. Because for a few minutes, they feel exactly the same.
And that's where the real question begins. There's a small moment when it happens. Not at the start of the day, not at the end. In the middle. A moment where you're supposed to stop and choose one thing. Not something big, just one. And that's when you notice that it feels heavier than doing one more small thing. Not because the choice is hard, but because it requires presence. Because the moment you choose, you're required to be there. Not drifting in thought, not feeling busy, being there, and acknowledging that you're doing something that actually changes something. When you choose, you stop moving for a moment. And when you stop moving, there's no noise to cover what's there. So you delay that moment. Not consciously. You do something else. Something small, clear, closed. Not to move forward, but to avoid feeling stuck. And this is where the confusion begins. Because action looks like responsibility. It feels like effort, like investment. You're doing something, so you're not standing on the sidelines. So how is that not progress? Because action always feels safer than choice. Action says, I'm involved. Choice says, I'm here. And the difference is subtle, but you can feel it. When you act, time passes. When you choose, something changes. Not because of the outcome, but because of responsibility. Because choice doesn't let you hide behind motion. When you choose, you take a side. You say, this, yes. This, no. And then if something doesn't work, there's no one to pass it to. Not the workload, not the time, not the conditions, just you. So without noticing, you build a day full of action. Action that feels right. Action that feels safe. But it doesn't require you to stand still and look at what's actually waiting there. And that's the part that's hardest to admit. Not that you're not moving forward, but that you're not stopping long enough to find out whether you are.
If this feels familiar so far, not as information, but as something you've been dealing with, we keep a growing collection of prompts, tools, and simple frameworks designed to help you think more clearly, start more easily, and work better in this environment. We add to it over time. Nothing overwhelming, just practical resources you can return to when you need them. If you want access, you will find it in the description. Now, let's continue. A lot of people see AI creations online today and think to themselves, looks amazing, but it's not for me. I don't have the talent for this. It must be complicated. But the truth? Most of what you're about to see didn't start with talent. It started with curiosity. One sentence, one experiment, and then another.
The visuals you're seeing right now were created from prompts people shared online. No secrets, no genius tricks. Someone wrote an idea, someone else changed a word, added a line, and tried again. That's how this works. Most people creating beautiful things with AI had no idea what they were doing at first. Not the first time, not the second. They simply dared to press generate and see what would happen. And this is the most important thing to understand. AI isn't looking for talent, it's looking for curiosity.
If something is holding you back, it's not a lack of knowledge, it's the fear of trying. But here, there's nothing to lose. No grades, no judgment, just a small experiment that might surprise you.
Creative prompts are everywhere today. On YouTube, in communities, shared by people documenting their journey. You don't need to invent everything from scratch. You can take an idea, change a word, and see where it leads. Every visual you saw here could have turned out completely different with one small change. And that's the magic.
If this video made you want to try, that's already a win. Not perfect, not smart, just curious. In the link in the description, you'll find the prompts behind these visuals, plus more free materials to help you take the first step, without noise, without pressure. And if you feel like continuing this journey with us, we're here, a small, faceless channel, learning and moving forward together.
Just click the link, enter your email, and the system will send everything to you automatically. No pressure, no commitment, no noise.
This doesn't happen in big moments. It happens in the details. You start the day with one thing you know you need to make a decision about. Not a dramatic one, not a life move, something small that hasn't moved in a while. You look at it for a moment, and then something else pops up. A message, something you can close quickly. You tell yourself, just this, it'll only take a minute. And then another one, and another. Not because you forgot the first thing. It's still there, waiting. Around midday, you come back to it, just to see that it still feels heavy. So you adjust something around it. You tweak the wording. You move a small detail. It feels serious. It feels responsible. But it doesn't require any real choice. In the afternoon, you're too tired to really go into it. So you do something that feels useful. You finish. You check it off. You close it. By the end of the day, there are a lot of check marks. And that thing is still there. Not because there wasn't time, but because there was never a moment where you stopped and agreed to choose. And if someone asked you what you did today, you'd answer without hesitation. The list is full. Just one question was never asked, and it waited all this time between all the things that were easier to do. There's a moment when you feel that something isn't quite right. Not drama, not an alarm, just a quiet sense that something is slipping. Not because you didn't do enough, you did a lot, but because you didn't stop long enough to notice what you were avoiding. Because sometimes the problem isn't overload. It's the direction that wasn't chosen. Not because you couldn't, not because you didn't know, but because every time you got close, it felt easier to do something else. Something that didn't require you to admit that you were choosing. And the strange thing is, there's no clear sign of it. No failure, no collapse, just a sequence of days filled with things that never asked you to truly be present. Days where you could point to what you did, but not to what you chose. Days where you were busy, but not really there. So you keep going, not because it's right, because it's familiar. Because as long as there's movement, there's no moment where you have to ask what's actually happening here. And it doesn't feel like escape, it feels like functioning. But somewhere inside, you know that movement doesn't hide the question, it only postpones it. And that it won't disappear. There's something waiting for the moment when you agree not to fill it with more doing, just to notice that it's there.
There are moments when you can feel it, but you don't yet know what to call it. Not stuck, not confused, just a quiet sense that something is shifting, slowly, without you asking it to. You remember what it used to feel like to begin without weight, without comparing, without checking first. Not because you were braver, but because the moment was yours. You would arrive at it and simply start. Not because you didn't know things could go wrong, but because whether they did or not wasn't the part that defined the moment. The moment was a beginning, not a calculation. Today, you arrive at the same moment, and it's already full. Not with something bad, with options, with checks, with what might be just a little more right. And that moment, which once felt like an opening, has become a transition. You're still doing, still thinking, still caring, but something small has changed in the way things begin. Before, you would step into the moment and it was empty. Now, you step into the moment and it's already full of questions that haven't been asked. Not bad questions, just questions that take up space. And the strange thing is, there's nothing here to blame, just a quiet understanding that what was once available no longer waits in the same way.
If you've been thinking about starting something with AI, maybe a YouTube channel, a business, or just working smarter, you're not alone.
At SmartAIDIGI, we create in-depth videos that make AI simple to understand and practical to use. Each episode explores real examples, smart workflows, and creative ways to apply AI in your daily work with no hype, just clarity and real value. And to help you get started, we've created a free AI starter kit with 224 prompts, 100 essential tools, and our complete master prompt guide. It's the easiest way to start your AI journey today. Grab your free resources at smartaidigi.com and subscribe to our channel. Join the creators who are learning to build smarter with AI.
If any of this felt familiar, there's a good chance it didn't start here, because the moment when things stop moving doesn't show up suddenly. It begins much earlier than that, in a different moment, a quieter one, a moment where even starting stopped feeling simple. Not because you didn't want to, not because you didn't know what to do, but because something small began to slip in before the first step. If you're trying to understand how this happened without you noticing, there's one moment worth returning to. In the previous video in this series, we looked at the point where starting first began to feel heavy. Not to learn something new, just to see where everything began to slow down. And if you stay here, this continues from that moment.